Under your leadership,
That is
DHS
not true.
has
Don't
left
accuse me of something that's not
detainees
true.
Without
Sir,
food.
you can
or
say all you
medical
want,
care,
but don't accuse me of
defying
something that's not
congressional
accurate. You can sit there and tell lies all day long, and all it is a lie. I just told you twice, it's under investigation.
Okay, so why wouldn't you explain that and answer very simply in some sort of public response to the American people over 2 months ago? Over 2 months ago when this letter was written, and over 3 months ago when this man was found dead.
A blind refugee disappeared after being released by DHS and was found dead days later. When Representative Tim Kennedy confronted the Homeland Security Secretary, the hearing quickly turned into a heated clash.
Nurul Amin Shah Alam, Secretary Mullin, does that name mean anything to you?
I'm sorry, repeat that?
Nurul Amin Shah Alam, does that name mean anything to you?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. I'm very saddened, heartbroken, and disgusted by that, quite frankly. Mr. Shah Alam was here lawfully in our country, arriving in Buffalo, New York as a refugee in December of 2024 with his wife and children. He and his family were in search of the American dream, a life free from persecution, free of genocide at the hands of their government, free from crimes against humanity, unimaginable to those of us that are lucky enough to be born in our free country. Mr. Shah Alam was promised a fate far different from what he'd been subjected to in Burma. Instead, his 14 months in the United States came to a tragic end following his release from your department. On February 19th, Mr. Shah Alam was detained by DHS. DHS agents determined he was here lawfully, and upon release, they dropped him at a closed coffee shop in Buffalo, New York in the dead of winter. That night, agents left him without proper clothing, without the care of his family, without any resources to find safety in near freezing temperatures. He was blind, disabled, spoke little to no English. His family, who filed a missing persons report days later, had no idea of his whereabouts or that he'd even been released. Tragically, Mr. Shah Alam was found dead 5 days later on February 24th, 2026, on a street in the unforgiving Buffalo winter, 5 miles from his home.
I just want to say that I am familiar with this case.
His death was caused by a stress ulcer, dehydration, and hypothermia, and it's been ruled a homicide. In the days following his passing, DHS claimed Mr. Shah Alam was dropped at a warm, safe location. DHS said he showed no signs of distress, mobility issues, or disabilities requiring special assistance. So, Mr. Secretary, yes or no, would you say that someone who's blind, has severe mobility issues, and who speaks a specific non-English dialect generally requires special assistance?
First of all, I need to correct my answer. I am familiar with this case. It is under investigation, and that's all I can say about it.
And would you...
The hearing reflected a broader debate over DHS detention and release procedures. While the department maintained that the case was under investigation, lawmakers continued pressing for public answers about agency policies, accountability, and how vulnerable migrants are handled after release.
Say that the back of a dark parking lot in a closed coffee shop on a winter night in Buffalo without proper clothing is a warm, safe location.
It's under investigation, sir.
The family of Nurul Amin Shah Alam, the Burmese community, the people of Buffalo, refugees in every community in our country, and every single American deserves answers from your department. I've sent multiple letters to your department, including the day after you were sworn in on March 24th, demanding that DHS open an investigation into this case. I've received nothing in return.
I just told you twice, it's under investigation.
Okay. So why wouldn't you explain that and answer very simply in some sort of public response to the American people over 2 months ago? Over 2 months ago when this letter was written, and over 3 months ago when this man was found dead, and the last people that had any contact with him that we are aware of were your department.
I apologize for not responding to you in 2 months. We want to really lean into that. In the past, I don't think this department underneath anyone's leadership has been real responsive to Congress. I have changed that. We are trying to be as responsive to anybody that calls me, reaches out to me. That's not acceptable, 2 months. I agree with that. But we could have easily told you it was been under its investigation.
So will you commit to providing my office and the people of this country with a timely response to my March 24th letter?
I just answered the question for your letter. If you want me to put it in writing, I can put it in writing
Yes,
before I
we want
leave
it-
here.
we want it in
Give me a piece of
writing.
paper, I'll put it down for you.
Yeah, we want the American people to see what your department is doing. So this committee deserves answers. The people of this country deserve answers. Your predecessor, Kristi Noem, ran this department straight into the ground. Her conduct as secretary disgraced the brave career law enforcement officials who signed up to work at the Department of Homeland Security to protect their fellow citizens. Since you became secretary, what have you done to change the culture of your department and ensure the actions of all DHS officials are consistent with the Constitution and our values as Americans?
Underneath the previous administration, they took the teeth out from our law enforcement DHS. My predecessor and myself were enforcing the law of the land, not turning a blind eye to it, and that's what Mayorkas did. He turned a blind eye to it.
Your predecessor is no longer here. She disgraced this department, and it seems like you are following right in her footsteps. Under your leadership,
That is
DHS
not true.
has
Don't
left
accuse me of something that's not
detainees
true.
Without
Sir,
food.
you can
or
say all you
medical
want,
care,
but don't accuse me of
defied
something that's not
congressional
accurate. You can sit there and tell
oversight,
lies all day long, and all it
ice
is is
into
a lie.
every corner.
Gentlemen's time.
That's a flat-out lie, and you know it's a
thank
flat
you.
lie.
Since this June 3, 2026 House Homeland Security Committee hearing, the case of Nurul Amin Shah Alam has continued to receive significant attention from Congress, New York officials, and immigrant advocacy organizations. The circumstances surrounding his death became even more consequential after the Erie County Medical Examiner officially ruled his death a homicide on April 1st, 2026, concluding that he died from complications of a perforated stress ulcer precipitated by hypothermia and dehydration after being placed in a hostile environment from which he could not reasonably escape. The medical examiner emphasized that the homicide ruling reflected that his death resulted from the actions or inaction of others and was not, by itself, a criminal determination. Following that ruling, New York Attorney General Letitia James began reviewing the circumstances surrounding the case, while Congressman Tim Kennedy, Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, Governor Kathy Hochul, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, and several House Democrats called for full federal, state, and independent investigations into Border Patrol's handling of Shah Alam's release. After Secretary Markwayne Mullin testified that the matter remained under investigation, congressional oversight continued rather than ending with this hearing. Representative Kennedy pressed the Department of Homeland Security for written responses to his earlier inquiries and publicly criticized the department for failing to communicate with Congress about the investigation. DHS maintained that an internal investigation was underway, while also defending Border Patrol's actions, arguing that Shah Alam accepted a courtesy ride to a location agents believed was safe and disputing claims that agents observed disabilities requiring additional assistance. Those explanations were challenged by surveillance evidence, the medical examiner's findings, and local officials who argued that a nearly blind refugee with limited English proficiency should never have been released alone under those circumstances. Community demonstrations continued in Buffalo, and lawmakers repeatedly renewed calls for greater transparency and possible policy changes governing the release of vulnerable individuals from federal custody. The hearing itself focused on accountability rather than immigration policy. Representative Tim Kennedy used Shah Alam's death to question whether the Department of Homeland Security fulfilled its basic duty of care after determining that he was lawfully present in the United States. His argument was not centered on immigration status, but on whether federal officials acted appropriately when releasing a vulnerable individual who was nearly blind, spoke little English, and depended heavily on assistance from family members. Secretary Markwayne Mullin did not dispute that the case was serious. After initially saying he did not recognize Shah Alam's name, he corrected himself and acknowledged familiarity with the incident, explaining that an internal investigation prevented him from discussing specific facts. Throughout the exchange, he repeatedly declined to answer questions about the release location or departmental decisions, instead emphasizing that the investigation should be allowed to proceed before public conclusions were reached. One of the most significant moments occurred when Kennedy challenged the department's earlier public statements describing the drop-off location as warm and safe. He contrasted those descriptions with the circumstances he outlined during the hearing: a closed business, freezing winter temperatures, limited clothing, severe visual impairment, and the absence of family notification. Rather than debating legal standards, Kennedy framed the issue as one of basic human responsibility and government accountability. The hearing also highlighted broader questions about how federal agencies handle vulnerable individuals after detention. Shah Alam's case raised concerns extending beyond one incident, including communication with families, access to interpreters, transportation decisions, disability accommodations, and coordination between federal agencies and local authorities. Those issues have become central to ongoing discussions about detention and release procedures involving individuals with significant medical, language, or mobility limitations. Another notable aspect of the exchange involved congressional oversight itself. Kennedy criticized the department for not responding to letters requesting information about the case, while Mullin acknowledged that waiting months without a response was unacceptable and pledged to provide a written reply. That commitment reflected a broader expectation that executive agencies remain responsive to congressional inquiries even while investigations remain active. The discussion also became increasingly personal as Kennedy criticized the previous leadership of the Department of Homeland Security and questioned whether meaningful cultural changes had occurred under the new secretary. Mullin rejected those accusations, arguing that the department was focused on enforcing existing law while also improving communication with Congress. The disagreement illustrated the tension that often arises when lawmakers seek immediate public accountability, while executive officials cite ongoing investigations as a reason to limit public comment. Looking back, the hearing represented more than a dispute over one tragic case. It reflected larger questions about government accountability, treatment of vulnerable individuals in federal custody, congressional oversight of executive agencies, and the balance between ongoing investigations and public transparency. Regardless of the final findings of the various investigations, the exchange demonstrated how a single incident can prompt broader examination of departmental policies and procedures intended to protect individuals who depend on the government's care.